Whenever I hear the story of the wise men, I'm reminded of the story that I see going around Facebook every year around Christmas time. You might know the one. It's the story of the three wise women. The three wise women would have asked for directions. They would have showed up on time. They would have brought practical gifts. They'd have helped deliver the baby. The three wise women would have cleaned the stable that the Holy Family spent their first night together in. And if the three wise women were good Methodists, they would have brought enough casserole to share with the shepherds, the angels, Mary and Joseph, and even those wise men who eventually showed up. What I love about the stories of the wise men and the wise women is that they show us what it means to be on the lookout for God's love in the world. Tony, could you go ahead and kill my mic, please? Thanks. The wise ones who first welcomed Jesus into the world, they show us how to respond to God's love, don't they? Whether it's with gold, frankincense, myrrh, or a good casserole, they show us how to respond to God's grace when it shows up. When the wise men from the story we just heard learned from the night sky that a newborn king of the Jewish people had arrived, they hitched up their camels, packed as much gold, frankincense, and myrrh as they could carry, and headed off to Jerusalem. Because that new star rising in the sky was more than just an astronomical anomaly. It revealed that love was born. That star pointed to the presence of God's love made flesh. The incarnation, the story of God's love becoming flesh and dwelling among us, is the whole point of Christmas. Christmas Day impacts all of life. When the love of God shows up in the world, abundant joy is offered to all. Because Christ was born, a new way of life has begun. The Christmas story reminds us that the love of God is constantly looking to dwell among us. We don't have to wait 12 months, as EC so rightly pointed out, to celebrate that love being born among us. Because that gift of God's love brings us abundant life, and anything and everything that brings abundant life is a gift from God. All of creation is touched by the presence of God. It can all reveal the presence of Christ, just like the star did for the Magi on that first Christmas. The Magi knew that this star pointed to the Messiah, God's anointed one, the living, breathing embodiment of God's promises fulfilled. A living, flesh and blood reminder of God's steadfast love. When King Herod heard from the wise men that a new king had been born, how did he respond? Fear. With fear. Herod heard these supposed wise men, these magi, these foreigners and scientists, telling him about his religion, his Messiah, and his God. And after hearing this good news about how God keeps God's promises, Herod was afraid. Maybe he was so concerned with holding on to his own power that he couldn't stand even the mention of a new king, even if that king happened to be the Messiah. Or maybe that's exactly what Herod was afraid of. Maybe Herod was afraid of what it might mean if the Magi were right. If Herod believed that God is with us right here and right now, then that belief would change everything. The presence of these Magi and their quest for God's Messiah meant that the world was changing. God was approaching. God's embrace was getting wider. And everything would change in the presence of this Messiah. And change can be difficult. Change can be hard. Change can be scary. And fear makes people do some unthinkable things. It would lead Herod and his advisors to try and kill Jesus. It would lead Herod to order the deaths of every infant under the age of 2 in and around Bethlehem. Fear is a powerful thing, isn't it? Fear causes people to hold on tighter to the illusion of control. Fear causes people to close off their hearts and their minds and their doors to those who are different from them. Fear lets people justify the hurt they do to others in the name of making themselves feel comfortable and secure. Fear let Herod justify his actions of violence against the children of Bethlehem and the families of Bethlehem. Fear still separates families today. We don't have to look very far for that, do we? Fear causes people to see scarcity and keeps them from experiencing joy. Fear causes people to hold on to what they have, afraid of what might happen, instead of seeing the good that God is doing right in front of us. Fear keeps people from seeing where God's love is leading. That's the difference, I think, between Herod and the Magi. Herod let fear control him. The wise men followed where God's love led. The wise men and the wise women who were left out of the story followed a wandering star through the night because they had faith it pointed to the presence of God. The Magi followed love and discovered abundant, exceedingly great joy. Overwhelmed by this joy, the Magi humbled themselves and bowed their knees before an unwed mother and child. Because there, in their presence, the Magi discovered the presence of God. Moved by this joy, the Magi gave their precious gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh to this poor family in a backwater town. Following love, they rejected the voice of fear and risked their lives to deceive Herod, to go home by a different way. Doing so put their own lives at risk, but they protected this family. They let go of their own need for comfort as they headed home by another way. Fear is a powerful thing. Love is stronger. Love is stronger. Both Herod and the Magi received the same good news. A child was born, King of the Jews, and this child was God's Messiah. Both heard that same message. And they responded very, very differently. And it causes us to ask the question of ourselves: how will we respond? How will we respond? Will we let ourselves be controlled by fear? Or will we let ourselves be led by love? As we see from the story of the Magi, letting love guide us will not always be easy. The terrain will be uncertain, the way ahead unclear. Sometimes love will lead us places we didn't expect it to be in the first place. Sometimes following love will mean doing the hard, risky thing of standing up for those who are vulnerable, like the Magi did for Jesus and his family. Sometimes love will mean doing the hard work of standing up for those who are hurt by fear. Because fear can keep us from doing the right thing, can't it? Fear can keep us from saying, hey, you know what? What's happening to the children at the border? Yeah, that's not right. It's not right. But friends, when we follow love, even if it takes us to places we don't expect to go, we will find the presence of God. And in the presence of God, that's where we feel joy. Following where the starlight leads might only show us one step at a time. But you know what? Ask me what? One step at a time is all we need to get back home, even if it means going a different way. Even if we don't know the way. When we follow where love leads, we can discover overwhelming, exceedingly great joy. And in that great joy, we find the presence of God. And when we are in the presence of God, we can give in abundance. Because we discover abundance in the presence of God. And out of that abundance, we give to honor Christ. All of us here have gifts to offer. Because all of us here are gifts. You are a gift from God. Can you just say that with me? Can you say, I am a gift from God? Amen. Well, you don't have to say that, but I appreciate it. And because you're a gift from God, that means you have something to give to God. Whether it's frankincense and myrrh, or enough casserole to feed all the hungry people you meet. Because we all know that the gifts that come from God we can use to honor Jesus by giving to those in need. That's what the wise men and the wise women show us. They show us how to recognize God's presence in the places we least expect it. They remind us that love has been born in the world, not just on Christmas Day, not even just on Christmas in July, but every moment of every day. And the wise ones show us how to follow where love leads. They show us how to give in response to the joy that God's love inspires within us. They show us how to follow the star that still shines today, even on a hot July morning in Henrietta, Texas. On this Christmas in July, we remember that love is born and waiting to guide us. We can see abundance because here today is the presence of Christ. Here today, we are in the presence of overwhelming, exceedingly great joy. And for that, I give thanks.